Hello, welcome back to Learnovative Agile and Scrum video series. My name is Vijay Bandaru. I'm a certified Scrum trainer, certified team coach, and certified enterprise coach from Scrum Alliance. I create these videos to help understand the Scrum concepts easily and so that you can implement them in your projects and products. Today in this video, we are going to cover Sprint Retrospective. So we'll be discussing what is retrospective purpose, what is a time box, who will participate, and what is the role of product owner, scrum master, developers, and stakeholders, some anti-patterns of the sprint review, and some tips to make the retrospective more effective. These are the agenda points for today. So what is the purpose of sprint retrospective? The purpose is to plan ways to improve quality and effectiveness. So quality is related to the product, which means whether the current definition of done is strong enough or is there a need to improve that quality standard by adding some stringent quality criteria. Effectiveness is related to the team with respect to their communication, collaboration, tools, techniques, practices, how they're helping. Is there any way that we can improve them? That's the purpose, primary purpose. The participants of the retrospective is Scrum team only. So when I say Scrum team, it includes product owner, all the developers, and Scrum master. And usually retrospective is considered to be a private meeting of the Scrum team because other people are not allowed. If you allow any other people, even as silent observers, it will be creating a kind of discomfort to the developers and product owner and Scrum master to discuss the things openly. So it is only for the Scrum team. Then time box, maximum 3 hours for 1 month sprint, and it is shorter than 1 month sprint, usually for retrospective. And when it occurs and frequency, it occurs on the last working day of the sprint after the sprint review, and the frequency is once per sprint. That means if you are running weekly sprint, every week one retrospective. If you are running 2-week sprint, then every 2 weeks one retrospective. If your sprint length is 1 month, then monthly one retrospective. So once per sprint. Then what is inspected in the retrospective? So how the sprint went with respect to people. People means the team members, the product owner, developer, scrum master. And the processes, what processes they have used to execute the sprint work, and what practices they have used, what tools they have used, and interactions within the team, and the current state of definition of done. These are the inspection areas. And what is adapted? Actionable improvements for the items inspected. That means if there is a room to improve the processes, they will be identified as actionable improvement, or the practices and tools can be improved in a better way. That will be an actionable improvement, or the interactions or communication, collaboration within the team, or there are more stringent quality criteria to be added for the definition of done. That is identified as a actionable improvement. So what is the role of product owner, scrum master, and developers within the retrospective? So the product owner, developer, all the developers, and scrum master, they give feedback to each and everyone. So the focus is on the 360-degree feedback kind of thing. That means the developers will give feedback to product owner and scrum master. Scrum master will give feedback to product owner and developers, and product owner also give feedback to developers and scrum master and receive feedback from the other parties. So that means it's a kind of 360-degree feedback with a focus of identifying actionable improvements related to people, processes, tools, techniques, all these things. So what could be possible inputs for the sprint retrospective? So information related to the sprint, which includes what was the sprint goal, how many items were selected, the backlog items selected to achieve the sprint goal, how many of them are completed and how many of them are not completed, what were the impediments occurred in the sprint, including date of raising and date of closing, and available capacity of the team, utilized capacity, and any other, maybe like the burn up chart or burn down chart, any useful information or artifacts will be the inputs for retrospective. What could be the possible output from the sprint retrospective? The actionable improvements related to people, which means the team Scrum team with respect to their communication, collaboration, or interactions, processes and practices improvements, tools improvements, techniques improvements, or additional quality standards identified. These are called actionable improvements, which is the primary output of the sprint retrospective. So a sample retrospective data. So usually that input information will be captured by the Scrum Master by taking the information from different tools like Jira tool or any other tools you are using in the team. So when I was working as a Scrum Master, I used to follow this approach. So there is a timeline you can see here. The timeline starts from day 1 to day 10. That means the sprint we were working on a 2-week sprint. So what happened? Significant actions or activities happened on day 1. So day 1 we had a sprint planning. So our goal was to create a basic shopping cart functionality. In order to achieve that goal, according to the priority decided by the product owner, the team has selected search list, add to cart, change quantity, billing address, and payment using Visa card. These are the items selected. And then we had 500 hours of capacity available. Then the red bars indicate different impediments occurred in the sprint, during the sprint, and start date. For example, impediment 3 happened on this day, day 4, and closed on day 6. So end date. So start date and end date. That is the information. And you can see the green boxes indicate on so and so date that particular item is done. When I say item is done, it is meeting the definition of done and approved by product owner. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items are done. And then the utilized capacity observed that in the finally we could use 400 hours of capacity. And also on sprint review, the last day before the retrospective sprint review happened. So a couple of observations happened in the sprint review also. For example, as you can see, during the sprint review, the demo did not go smooth, and what was shown in the review did not meet the customer expectations. These were the observations from sprint review. So I captured this information into a small infographic kind of thing, one or two slides of a presentation. And then I will use one of the techniques, which I'm going to cover maybe next couple of minutes, to discuss what went well, what went wrong, all this information. So because this is the one single information shown to the product owner and all the developers, everybody will be aligned with their thought process in order to give meaningful insights, generate insights, and identify actionable improvements. So it is good if you can create this kind of infographic based on the data of the retrospective in your retrospectives. So some anti-patterns which you should avoid. When I say anti-pattern, it is something sounding like, but it doesn't give you valuable benefits or good benefits. So you should avoid these anti-patterns when you're running the retrospective. So for example, let's see one by one here. Combining the sprint retrospective and review, thinking it saves time. It's an anti-pattern because the purpose and participants are different for sprint review as well as retrospective. So the purpose of review is to get the product inspection. So that is where you need the stakeholders, customers, and users. Purpose of retrospective is to inspect and adapt the Scrum team with respect to people, processes, tools, techniques. So these are two different focus areas. So it is not good to combine both of them. And not focusing on the time boxing on the retrospective. So as a facilitator, the Scrum Master should take care of the time box, because if the time box is not properly followed, by the end of the retrospective, you may end up discussing what went well, what went wrong, but you may not have identified any actionable improvements. So focusing on the time boxing is important. Trying to find excuses in the sprint retrospective instead of deep diving into the root causes. So it is not a meeting to escape or identifying the excuses. It is, as a Scrum team, the entire team, based on the experience of the current sprint, the team has to identify some actionable improvements. So it's not about finding excuses. It is to identify actionable improvements. And focus of retrospective is on who is the problem instead of what is the problem. So it loses the psychological safety. The more you point fingers to one or two people in the team, they feel less psychological safe. So it is not a good idea to use that. And allowing outsiders other than the Scrum team, again, that leads to a lack of openness and people cannot talk openly in the retrospective. So it is private meeting of the Scrum team, the retrospective is. And another anti-pattern is canceling the sprint retrospective to use the time for the development activities for of the sprint. So sometimes when I was coaching some teams, they think that there are a couple of testing and some code review activities pending for a couple of things, items of the sprint. So instead of doing the retrospective, if we use that 2 to 3 hours time, we can finish that. So according to Scrum Guide, failure to operate any events as prescribed in Scrum Guide loses an opportunity to inspection and adaptation. So it is not good to leave any event. It could be sprint planning or daily Scrum or review retrospective, whatever be the event, it is meant for a purpose. So you should not be skipping that. And product owner is kept out of the sprint review. This is another observation from my coaching engagements. So developers and Scrum Master feel that, oh, we don't need product owner. So the moment product owner stops coming, attending and participating in the sprint retrospective, the gap between developers and product owner will slowly increase. When the gap is increased, the trust and transparency will go for a toss. So the entire Scrum team is required to be participating actively in the retrospective. Next, not having enough information in the sprint to find things that can be improved. So sometimes I also observed the Scrum Masters, they feel that, okay, their job in the retrospective is to just book a meeting room and arrange some snacks, water bottles or coffee, tea, and directly jump into the retrospective asking, okay, guys, let's discuss what went well, what went wrong. So without having any information, something like I have shown in the earlier screen, the information from day 1 to date and what happened, what are the significant activities, and how the items were completed during the sprint, that is very, very important. So information leads to insights. Insights help to create actionable improvements. And not conducting a sprint retrospective every sprint. This is another common anti-pattern. Think that sometimes people think that every sprint, what is there to improve? So continuous improvement is a journey, not a destination. So every sprint, you need to conduct the retrospective. Something or the other improvements you may be able to identify. Another anti-pattern, focus on the retrospective is only to blame each other and no actionable improvements identified. It's not about conflicting or competing with each other. As a team, how did we perform in the sprint? And how can we collectively become better in the next sprint? That is a goal for retrospective. And using the same technique continuously, that leads to boring and non-engaging retrospectives and for the participants. So it is important to identify suitable tools or methods or techniques to conduct the retrospective, which will make more engaging, active, and positive and productive. So it's the job of Scrum Master to identify the suitable retrospectives for depending upon the mood and data and the other factors. And the last anti-pattern, randomly selecting improvements instead of collaborative agreement-based improvements. So it's always important when you have multiple improvements identified, as a team, consensus-based selection is important. Maybe you can use a dot voting technique when multiple improvements are identified in the retrospective. As a Scrum Master, you can ask the developers and product owner, okay, guys, how many improvements we can aim for? Let's say if they have agreed for 2 improvements. Okay, everybody will get 2 votes. Out of the listed improvements, you distribute your 2 votes. Then finally, we will select whichever improvements have got maximum votes. So try to avoid these anti-patterns when you're conducting the retrospective because they will lead to negative consequences. Then some tools, retro or techniques we call it as. So first thing, what went well, what went wrong, and what to improve. So this is one technique that you can use. You create 3 categories. What went well, 1 category. What went wrong, 1 category. What to improve, 1 category. Maybe different colors, and you give different post-it notes. And then once you display the data that we discussed earlier, the sprint data, let the team, developers, and product owner understand that looking into the data and they understand and analyze the data. and then ask them, okay, use the green color post-it based on the data you have just observed. What do you think went well in the sprint? Write on a green post-it note. What do you think did not go well? Write on a red post-it note. As a team, what are the things we need to improve? Write on a blue post-it note. So once everybody writes on the different color post-it notes, then as a Scrum Master, you try to categorize them, grouping them, or using some affinity techniques. And then let the developers and product owner collectively decide what are the improvements that they can make based on the data. This is one technique. There is one more technique called as 4L model. So 4L model, you create 4 categories here or 4 quadrants. So liked, lacked, learned, and longed for. So for each quadrant, again, you use different color. So for example, green, what did you like in the sprint? And red, what did you lack in the sprint? And orange or amber, what did you learn in the sprint? And blue color, what did you long for? And these are the 4 quadrants. After showing the data insights, let them pick up the corresponding color post-it note and then let them write it. And again, you group them and then based on the discussions, try to achieve a consensus-based actionable improvements. This is another technique. So there is one more technique called as start, stop, continue. So you draw a big circle. In the circle, you will make three categories or 3 sections. So each of the section. So for example, one section is what should we stop doing because we have experimented in the current sprint and it didn't give us results. So it can be anything related to processes or tools or techniques or anything else. So what did we try something which didn't work well? So we should stop. And then what should we start doing newly? That means what are some new things that we have to introduce in the team so that we'll become better? Again, could be related to processes, tools, techniques, or anything else. And what should we continue doing? Because we have experimented and used in the current sprint, and we realized that they're helping, and we believe that they still are going to help in the subsequent sprints. So we are going to continue. So again, ask them to pick up different color post-it notes for each category and write them based on the data insights that you have shown. And then finally, consolidate using some grouping and then finally help the team to create some actionable improvements. So there are different techniques available. There is a speedboat or sailboat or a hot air balloon. So there are so many techniques available in the internet. You can check them. So these are just some sample techniques you can use in the retrospective. Then tips for effective retrospective. What are some tips that you can use to make the retrospectives effectively? Create psychological safety. So psychological safety means ensure that the team feels safe to speak honestly without fear of blame or retaliation. Set a tone of trust and openness from the start, from the beginning of the retrospective. A reminder of the retrospective prime directive can help. And also something like this you can try. Regardless of what we discover, we understand and truly believe that everybody has done their best job they could. So that sets the trust. So psychological safety is very, very important. So next, set clear goal for the retrospective. So something like framing a purpose for the retrospective. Today, we want to uncover what's working well, what doesn't work well, or how to improve. Clarify that the focus is continuous improvement with respect to people, processes, tools, techniques, like that. So setting a goal and setting a psychological safety is really important for the retrospectives to make it open. So use different formats for each retrospective. So imagine you like biryani. So next 30 to 40 days, what happens if you eat biryani for lunch and dinner? You'll start hating it. It won't be your favorite dish anymore. So similarly, if you use the same technique for conducting the retrospectives more than 2 to 3 sprints continuously, simultaneously, people will be bored, non-engaging, non-interactive. So if you're a Scrum Master, I would recommend you to learn at least 25 different techniques of conducting the retrospective, because usually I'm saying not described by Scrum, The sprint length is 2 weeks. Scrum says less than or equal to 1 month, any duration is good. But in general, wherever I worked as a Scrum Master and Enterprise Agile Coach, 2 weeks is the general sprint duration. So if you learn 25 different techniques to conduct the retrospective, 25 into 2 weeks, that means almost 1 year, 50 weeks, you can run retrospectives without repeating the same technique. So it will get more engaging and interactions. And the next tip, use fact-based data and artifacts. So that means collecting the data from the sprint, as we discussed, creating a meaningful information to generate insights, and something like burn down, burn up to analyze how they are going. That is also very, very important to make the retrospective effective. Celebrate the success first. So that means start on a positive note, recognize the accomplishments, teamwork, and the progress that the team has made. This energizes the team and also create a constructive tone for taking the challenges. So it is important to start with some positive note, celebrate the success. Then the next one, ensure equal voice. That means use facilitation tools like silent brainstorming or post-it notes or breakout rooms to give everyone space to contribute, especially quieter team members. And if required, sometimes you can ask, okay, let's hear one by one on a round robin approach. So that will give everybody get a chance to talk and express their opinions and intentions. And the next, drill down into the root causes. So don't stop as a service level observations. Use techniques like 5 eyes or fishbone diagrams and dig into the root causes. That means the reasons behind what is happening, especially if not for everything, especially for the important critical bugs or some repeated patterns or trends happening. If you do the root cause analysis, that will help you to solve the root cause. So there are two ways: solving the problem and solving the root cause. Solving the problem may always have a chance to repeat the same problem, but if you solve the root cause, the same problem may not occur. So that way you will be becoming more effective. Then next, identify concrete and actionable improvements. So it is important to close the retrospective at least 1 or 2 actionable improvements. The word actionable is important here. That means it should be completed. It could be actioned and completed maybe in few days. So it is important for the Scrum Master to ensure collectively all the developers and product owner identifies and agrees at least 1 or 2 actionable improvements, which may be related to processes or tools or techniques, anything, doesn't matter. Next, review past retrospective action items. So keeping track of the old retrospectives is always good, because imagine, let's say in the previous retrospective, there were 6 identified actionable improvements, but the team has selected only 3. So those 3, whether they are completed or not, it is important to track. So start the retrospective with the previous action items status, whether they need to still continue or they can be closed, and then start the current sprint data. And at the end of the current sprint data, again, add the actionable improvements to the repository. So when I was working as a Scrum Master, I used to have a Google spreadsheet. For every sprint, I keep the sprint number and actionable improvements list, and then out of the list which are selected for implementation. So that way, over a period of time, if team feels, oh, we are already improved, there is nothing to improve, then you can go back to the repository and identify those improvements which were not acted upon previously, and then you can ask the team to pull some of them. So that will help you to continuously improve the team. So last but not least, focus on what and not who, as we discussed. The purpose of the sprint retrospective is not to identify who is the culprit. It's not about blaming somebody. It is to identify what problem the team is facing and how we can collectively address that problem and identify the processes or tools or technique improvement to address that. And also inspect and adapt the retrospective. So finally, at the end of retrospective, just keep 2 minutes to discuss by taking a voting 1 to 5. How did you feel the retrospective? 1 means very, very less effective, less engaging, not interactive, less useful. And 5 means highly effective, highly interactive, engaging, and the team could be able to identify different actionable improvements. So ask the developers and product owner to give a rating, and based on the rating, identify what can be done in the next retrospective in terms of maybe using a different format or a different processes or tools, whatever you want to use. That is important. So that's about Sprint Retrospective. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you are looking for any public or private Agile, Scrum, Safe, or artificial intelligence training, maybe AI for Scrum Master or AI for product owners or Scaled Agile certifications, please approach to us. You can see our email ID and contact numbers on website. Thank you so much and have a great time.